Every year, MLS tells us the gap is closing. And every year, the Concacaf Champions Cup seems to ask the same uncomfortable question. Are we sure? LAFC had the stars. They had the lead, they had the ambition. And then they went to toluca and lost 4-0. So now, we're back in the same debate. Is MLS being held back by its own roster rules, salary cap, and just general obsession with parity? Or are we letting teams, coaches, and the players off the hook when they simply don't show up? And here's the part that makes this conversation even harder. Parity is not automatically bad. It may be one of the few reasons MLS has survived long enough to even have this debate. But if the league wants to grow from this stable American sports league into a serious global soccer league, something has to change. That's what we're getting into today. Vamos. Daniel, appreciate you coming on, man. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man.
Forward to it.
Oh, man, me too. Same here, man. Looking forward to it for a few days now. We kind of been planning this thing. And look, for people who may not already follow you, I want to give you a proper intro just because I think you bring a really valuable perspective to this conversation that in all honesty just feels like it's ongoing across multiple fan bases, multiple YouTube channels. But I want to go a little bit deeper than some of those have gone. So look, let's tee you up with a great intro first, and then we'll dive right into it. From what I found, right, you're the co-founder and owner / director of Arriba Bolso, which I found really to be a football media project connected deeply to Nacional more than anything else. Did see some broader South American football culture in there as well. Now, again, for those who haven't checked you out already, you're also covered the game here in the U.S. extensively. Work around the U.S. Open Cup. You're involved with soccer reporters. And in all honesty, man, from my perspective, you're constantly in the middle of these bigger conversations around MLS, Inter Miami, roster building, which we'll talk about today, and where this league actually fits in within the global game. So that's why I wanted to have you on. For me, this is definitely not just a reaction to the MLS teams most recently getting knocked out of Champions Cup again. You're someone who deeply understands the league, but also understands where football culture and club expectations look like outside of this weird MLS bubble that we all kind of live and operate in. So look, man, let's start with how we met, just the kind of the conversation back and forth on X, where I think your point was very clear. MLS is, and again, stop me where I'm wrong, not going to consistently compete with Liga MX unless the league changes how it operates, especially around the salary cap and the roster rules.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. I really don't think that they've competed. When you look at history, only a couple times has an MLS team won the Concacaf Champions Cup. And I know we're going to get into it. Obviously, there's another layer to this. There's Leagues Cup, and there's, going to be some pushback on that in terms of what's going on. But absolutely, man. That's 100%. Like you said, you said it exactly how I said it. And yeah, I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of essentially the owners not being allowed to spend what they should or want to spend in order to create a team that can compete. At least, I mean, I would like it to compete globally on the Club World Cup platform, but obviously we need to start with the smaller steps first, and that really goes into competing in your regional competition, and that's the CCC. And unfortunately for MLS teams, it hasn't been very positive over the last few years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's nuance to that, of course, right? We'll get into it, but I think this rang true for me and so many others. But I do know that there's limitations or regulations sometimes preventing that. We'll talk about that as well. But look, guys, this is how we met, right? I kind of noticed this, and we want to back up just one more second. I think LAFC's performance to me is the one hole that myself and I've seen others really try to poke in the logic around that, right? And that's how I think this video will go today. For anybody who's tuning in, I think it's going to be extremely balanced. And I think there's areas where I will fully agree with Daniel in that MLS can and should look at real change when it comes to how teams are able to build their rosters. But beyond that, I also think that there's reasons for why the league is even where it's at today. So we're definitely going to talk about it. Look, man, jumping into the first question here, and I think that for me, I want to start here and just kind of see where the conversation takes us, man. When MLS teams fall short, let's stick with the Champions Cup for a second, because there's ways to sugarcoat expectations in the league itself. What do you believe is actually the bigger issue? Are individual clubs, let's keep it that way, failing, or teams failing in big moments? And we both know that football is such a game of moments. Or is the league structure making it almost impossible for them to consistently compete with, again, let's put it out there, Liga MX?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think so. I mean, we can really start at the top and start talking about the salary cap, right? Or we shouldn't really call it a salary cap. We should more likely call it a salary budget. Really what it really is a talent ceiling. So we're operating in 2026 on a budget of 6.4 million for a senior roster. And that's, I mean, when you think about it, 6.4 million could sound like a lot of money, but when you're spreading it across 20 different players, now you compare that to Liga MX, the Giants don't operate with this spreadsheet in one hand and a calculator in the other hand. They're allowed to spend what's necessary to win. And so in the MLS, we've built a league that unfortunately prioritizes the financial safety over really that continental glory and going after winning that big trophy. So it really stinks, because you can't really expect to win this regional war, as you know, the US fans and the Liga MX fans like to call it, because there is this war when they go up against each other. There are hate watches. There are teams that want MLS to win, even though it's not their team, because they want to say that they reign supreme over Liga MX. And unfortunately, like I said, when your hands are tied by a budget that, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, is designed for a 1996 survival, it's never going to happen, man. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah. So with this budget structure, right, we're talking about, you mentioned not really calling it a salary cap. It's more like a salary budget. We're talking about the roster rules, the DP model, all of it, right? The wage structure. I mean, we're not talking about any one of those in isolation, are we?
No. I mean, really, if we really talk about it, right, the MLS roster rules, it's like a puzzle, right? And you know them as well as I know them, as well as a lot of other folks that cover the league. I mean, right now there's two models. You have the 3DP and the 3 U22s, or the 2 DPs and the 4 U22s plus GAM plus TAM. I mean, at the end of the day, I question, like, why do we make this so freaking complicated? I mean, in any other league in the world, if an owner wants to invest in a left back to win a trophy, and I'm going to give you a clear example, Jose Cancelo for Barcelona, who yesterday beat Real Madrid and won a trophy, he's on loan from Al Hilal, if I'm not mistaken, because Al Hilal didn't register him on the team. So he said, see you guys, I'm out. And Barcelona said, hey, we're going to pay whatever it is that we need to pay to bring this guy so that we can win. And they did it. So in other leagues, they do that. Here, you have to check roster compliance. You have to check the discovery rights, right? Because now apparently Neymar's discovery rights are held by the LA Galaxy or Cincinnati. I don't know who they're held by. And
I don't know either.
So, I mean, look, we're basically forcing a league engineered like to force parity. And while we do that, unfortunately, we're just draining the competitive instinct out of this whole roster building process that would allow us to compete and construct a real roster. 23 guys paid a good amount of money so that they can compete at a high level, and not these, half rosters where you have a starting lineup, but then you're left with a bunch of homegrowns and young talents on the bench. And that's the biggest difference between both leagues.
Yeah. I mean, doing away with the DP model would take way more work than fixing the wage structure, in my opinion. I mean, realistically, can you fix both of those at the same time?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough. So I think definitely the one thing that they need to do instantly is come up with a fourth DP. Now, I have a couple of different ways and ideas that you could do this fourth DP. Maybe what you do is you bring in a fourth DP and you make it like a continental DP. So, for example, you can bring
Mm.
in a player from Mexico, from Central America, from South America, and he won't count towards the that max cap. And so that'll allow you to start maybe competing with some of the teams down in South America and Central America and Mexico for some of the bigger names down in that area, so that you can bring them up. So that could be another option. But at the end of the day, they have to start spending on the secondary roster. They have to start spending on players 12 through 20. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to compete with bigger teams.
Yeah, I agree. I think the days of, and this is where the conversation I think gets a little bit like chicken and the egg sometimes, right? Because the biggest argument for keeping the structure the way that it is, people will cite parity. And I think parity made sense when the league was in survival mode. I understand the league's still 30 years old. It is an infant, a newborn child in comparison to so many leagues globally across the world. But at the same time, right, I think you have to understand when the league itself is in a strong period of growth, which if I believe every statistic out there and revenue number out there regarding where the league is today versus where it was 10 years ago, we should be pretty confident what that number looks like and what it means. So if that is the case, in fact, then I do think it is right to explore changing what can be changed in the short term with plans to make it long term, right? Which is why I asked the question, Daniel, about what if you had to pick one, right? You mentioned a continental DP. I think that's super interesting, but there will still be diehard fans that cite parity, right? That what happens if a team, a market, an owner comes out like I can't remember the owner of the Impact, or sorry, of CF Montreal, but him outright coming out and saying, "Hey, look, we're just not really going to be the team, the franchise in this league that spends money. Like we just don't want to be that team. Our fans will kind of have to get behind that, even in this franchise sports model that we're in." How do you feel the league will shake out with as many teams as we have, as many markets as we have, knowing that that's still a real concern, not just for owners, but just a lot of fans in those specific markets?
Look, I mean, I think you have a lot of teams that have at least shown that they're willing to spend some sort of money. You have Inter Miami, you have both teams in LA. Cincinnati has shown that they're willing to spend some money, bringing in Denke and bringing in Evander and reinforcing their team to make that run last year. Obviously, the New York teams, they've shown that they're willing to invest a little bit. But yeah, there are some other teams in some other markets, like you mentioned, Montreal, Toronto. Even though they invested a lot of money in Josh Sargent recently, Portland is probably one that comes to mind. Yeah, that they don't spend money, but there's always those types of teams in leagues around the world that just don't spend enough money, and they're always going to be fighting, and they're going to be, unfortunately, fighting for, in other leagues, relegation. In the MLS, that doesn't happen. So, yeah, that they would have to be the spoiler, but at the end of the day, it's basically, and I know that this is something that we're going to discuss later, but it's, what does the MLS really want to accomplish? What do they want to do? Do they want to be the best business in the United States, the best sports business in the United States, the best sports business in the world? Do they want to be the best league talent wise, tactically, in the world, in the region? And that's really the question that they need to ask themselves, is what is it that they want? And I mean, I know we can definitely dive into that one, because that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. I mean, what the league wants, it almost depends on if we're asking the question now while Garber is still there, or in a year and a half's time from now when he's not there anymore. So
He says the right things, right? He says the right things, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, and his press releases that he's famous for. So, I mean, you can want to be the best while also being afraid of individual club success, right? Right now, like the MLS, they want to be the best business, like I said, in the region. But to be the best league, you have to stop valuing the safety over the trophy winning ambition. So at the end of the day, the infrastructure is there. They just need to find the competitive soul. And in order to find the competitive soul, I think you have to bring in, and you mentioned it with Don Garber there, we're never going to find that. So you have to bring in somebody, and there's a lot of talk about that, which it gets me excited, that you need to bring in somebody that has a soccer background, that has a football background, that understands it. Because as I understand it, Garber is a person who didn't even like the sport before he got into it.
yeah. No, 100%. I mean, technically, the 1.0 guys are all NFL guys, right? For the most part. I mean, they're just it's a real estate grab at the end of the day, a cash grab from their perspective. But
Exactly.
I mean, with Garber, yeah, he again, it's like one of those things. It's like parody, right? Like in my mind, there's so many fans who say, "Bro, Garber's the worst thing to ever happen in MLS." I'm like, you could not be more wrong. I don't think anybody can be more wrong. Like, while I agree with you in that he's not a football guy, he's not a soccer guy. Like, in order for the league to be successful, it had to really be run as a business to an extent in the earliest of years, right? You need cash flow is king, and you need that running through the best way you possibly can in order to get people and in order to get owners who knew nothing about this game interested in investing lots of money into this game in America. You had to minimize risk. Like, I understand why the rules and the regulations are the way that they are. I think a lot of fans just sometimes forget that we're still technically in our infancy as a league. But I do also believe that at some point, just because there was a path that got you to where you are today, it doesn't always mean it's the right path to get you to where you want to go, which is why the question you asked is so crucial, right? Like, what is the end goal of Major League Soccer? I do believe that will evolve, that will change. But from the fans' perspective, another argument that I hear made frequently for those who are in favor of the parity-led rules that we have today is they'll point to, and you know those folks, right? They'll point to the 2, 3, 4, 5 team monopolies that exist in some of the biggest leagues across the world, right? I mean, when I think of monopoly, I think of more of like leagues like how Bayern runs the Bundesliga, as an example,
PSG.
or
Right.
Madrid Barca running La Liga. How would you react to that argument made by fans?
I honestly, I would like that. Like, wouldn't you? I mean, obviously, if you're a fan of a team who's going to be that giant, right? And I think MLS has the money and the opportunity and the franchises in order to build a number of those teams. I don't think MLS would ever be a 2 or 3 team, you know, basically season. I think that there's a lot of teams that would like to spend, that would like to fill up their rosters with good players. And so if you're a fan of one of those teams, it's going to be fantastic. Now, if you're not, yeah, it's going to be a struggle, but wouldn't it be great if you beat those teams? Or how much more exciting would it be if, you end up in the playoffs that season, or you make it that far? I mean, look, at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to get rid of the playoffs. I don't think they're going to get rid of all that stuff. So you'll always have a chance to get in, but look, we just, what we want is to just look better aesthetically on a world stage. We want to play better football. We want to see every Saturday and Sunday, sometimes on Wednesdays like this week, we want to see the players out on the field. We want to see a better product. And we don't get a better product if they continue operating the way that they are operating, which is essentially afraid of another collapse like they had in 96, right? But they had, like you mentioned, sometimes the best option is not continuing on the same path. And I think they've continued on this path long enough, and it's time to finally switch paths and go on to greener pastures.
Yeah, I I agree. When I ask myself this same question, I'm always so torn, right? Because sometimes I think maybe it's public perception, right? And again, for those who are like on football Twitter or anything along those lines, I mean, it's literally just again being a fan of a big club in a given league. Let's say a European top 5 league as an example, where the accomplishments of your team, your players, everything you love about the club are diminished, right? Because of the Farmers League perception, right? And therefore, the perception of that greater league becomes that, hey, it's not a serious league. You know, it's going to be what PSG is to Ligue 1, leaving out the fact that PSG are defending European champions and on path for back-to-back European championships in terms of winning the Champions League. So I don't know, man. It's sometimes I think public perception shouldn't matter that much, but I do think fans are fearful of that, and they do, for that reason, will cite, "Hey, I like that. I can be a fan of a brand new expansion team and come right into Major League Soccer and matter, right? And actually not have to go through this growth period where I'm in pain and suffering as a brand new fan for more than a few years until we figure it out. I actually have a chance to be relevant and possibly even by the league standards successful in years 1 and 2."
Yeah, and that's fine if you want to compete at a local level. But if the conversation, and at the end of the day, what MLS wants is to be a regional powerhouse, or they
Mhm.
want to compete on a global stage, then that's just not the answer. It sounds pretty on paper, but at the end of the day, it's not going to bring in the eyes, because if you don't end up winning one of these Concacaf champions in the next few years, one of your teams is not going to be invited into the Club World Cup. And if you're not invited to the Club World Cup, then that's a big missed opportunity for a lot of eyes to get onto an MLS squad. So if they want to grow, that has to be the answer. And if they want to continue the way they are, I think they'll be okay, but they'll just never get over the hump of being a regional powerhouse. They won't ever have a chance of competing in a Copa Libertadores, like it was rumored that Inter Miami was going to be invited to participate in next year's Copa Libertadores. I just don't see that happening, and I don't think that they can compete on that level because they just don't have the pieces. They don't have the roster. They don't have the depth. And yeah, I mean, parity sounds great, but it's just not for me.
Yeah, I agree. With that said though, I understand where most of the people are coming from. Like I will try to remain as unbiased as I can in this. I get where you're coming from, but again, we'll circle back to it. It's just like it got us to where we are, right? And there's a tipping point. And I think not even just the leagues, I would say the businesses out there, if we're gonna make this a business decision, the businesses that miss that tipping point, I'm not saying often the ones that go under, but they never reach the potential. They never reach the ceiling. And so, MLS is something that is so far and away different from anything else globally. So it should be treated differently. But at some point, to be recognized how other leagues globally are recognized, I do agree that we have to be on this path to change. And we'll get there. I definitely want to understand from your perspective, Daniel, what you would change realistically in the short term and how that could scale into what actually happens long term. But before that, I think the only other piece I wanted to bring up in today's video was really the accountability piece. Because to me, I agree with your overarching message, but I will go back to what I said when I originally kind of reacted to what you posted. I still think it lets certain teams off the hook. Because in my mind, when I watched that LAFC Toluca match, I didn't know what I was watching. Like outside of Hugo Lloris, I can't think of a single player who deserved any kind of recognition for their performance. I think the manager got the lineup wrong. And I also think LAFC is in a weird run of form, both, domestically in the league and then, of course, how they bounced out of the competition. Even if MLS roster rules are restrictive, I still believe clubs have agency. They need to be held accountable. What would be your response to that? Because I think that's something where, do you feel like right now we're letting teams like LAFC who do spend real big money, have real legitimate stars on their team, off the hook?
I mean, that's kind of a loaded question a little bit, but I think yes, I think they are a little bit off the hook, but I do think that they need to be held to a different standard because of the roster that they've constructed. Right? They have Denny Buanga, they have Sun Min Hung, they have Hugo Lloris, they have David Martinez. So they have a lot of really good and really young players within there now. Both things can be true, right? The MLS is structurally limited, and individual clubs still underperform. So when you have players like Son and Lloris, you essentially lose the right to use the rules as an excuse for a blowout. I mean, you're no longer just an MLS team. You're just a global brand with elite expectations. So if you invest that kind of capital, the standard isn't really competing, it's dominating. So a 4-0 loss, like you mentioned, it was a complete collapse. For LAFC, it's not just an exit out of the tournament. It's an embarrassment to the project that they tried to build, because with that roster, there's really no learning curve. They only have the results. I mean, they had the team constructed. They played well towards the end of last season. They started off really well this season, thumping Inter Miami in the opening game. And then from then on, it's been an absolute downhill for Mark's team. And I think really he's partly and mainly to blame for what happened at Toluca.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I really want to cite here is I'm going to pull this up because I know the Goals Twitter account kind of shared this news afterward. I don't know if you heard some of the words that he used after in the press conference, but I think it was super interesting. It gives me a lot of empathy for LAFC fans and kind of what they're having to deal with right now. But just to kind of go through really quickly, This is the exact quote. There were clowns on the bench. Last night, LAFC suffered a 4-0 loss to Toluca. In the press conference, Marc Dos Santos called the manager and his staff clowns. I want to start by saying that I'm from another planet mentally. I have class as a person. I know how to win, and I know how to lose. I want to wish Mr. Mohamed Toluca good luck in the final, even if in the end they were clowns on the bench. You have to have class because the world turns very fast. He's older than me, but if he listens to me now, I want to say that having class when you win is a quality of a strong man. What he did after the game was just clowning around. So, it reads like it's just so ironic,
This guy's never been in South America, man.
It's just ironic again, right? To say this is what a classy man looks like. I'm pretty sure a classy man wouldn't talk this way in a press conference afterward either, if I'm being serious. But it's just, again, right, it lets you know about the state of where LAFC is. And that's, in all honesty, when I look at the result, to me, it's a mixture of having a manager like this, of the players being out of good form like they are in the league. They just came off the back of a 4-1 loss to Houston at home. And other just weird results leading up to the Luka game. So, a mixture of all of those things. And that's why I bring it up, because it's just like, to me, it became, I think your tweet, but just the end result in general became an invitation for anyone out there to be like, yep, this is the specific and only reason why MLS teams are never going to be able to shine in this competition.
Yeah.
And I agree.
I will give him credit for one thing. He did say something which I think I might have criticized on my podcast, and I want to go back on it, because he mentioned that the MLS should give some sort of concessions to teams that are in these tournaments, and mainly in terms of in terms of calendar concessions. So, for example, they had a bunch of games coming up, and obviously they had the Concacaf Champions games. I think MLS should move those games, postpone some of those games on the weekend to give them some extra days of rest. Now, in this case, Toluca also played a game on that weekend, so they both, had that. But who knows, if they would have had the rest, and maybe they would have gotten to Mexico a few days earlier and trained in the altitude a few days earlier, or gotten used to it. You never know. Maybe they would have had a better result in the game. So that's one thing I will do. But the rest of that quote after what he said, I mean, that's just a quote from a manager that just lost the game. Like, that's just a loser quote, unfortunately. And I mean, it sounds brutal to say it that way, but I mean, come on, like, yeah, you learn how to lose. Clearly you didn't, because you went up to the press box and you whined about it, and you whined about what the other coach did, instead of talking about what actually happened on the field and the tactical masterclass, or I guess disaster class, as we'd like to call it, of what you showed. So yeah, man, I mean, come on, like, he needs to go. He was never the right. This is not a part of the topic, but he was never the right hire for LAFC. They need a manager who, Tata Martino would have been fantastic when he was rumored to go there, but somebody who can really manage the egos, somebody who can really manage the locker room. That's the type of coaches we need in MLS, and that's another conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, no, and you know what's crazy about that is that we were having that same debate a little bit on our show previously. Was when Tata was rumored to go back to Atlanta, I'm like, why would he? Because I vaguely heard the rumors about LAFC. I'm like, why would he choose I understand it's a homecoming. I know there's a certain amount of sentiment attached to that, but why put yourself in that really weird position that the previous manager could not figure out, even with the war chest of cash they had to go with? You have things set up almost perfectly at LAFC. It's a good team. They're going to add another mega star potentially to the mix at some point, right? We don't really know with the added deep plea slot. And I'm just like, it felt like too good to be true if you're a manager on the market. And I don't know, maybe he regrets it a little bit. You're right. It's a conversation for another day, and and how that's going to kind of work out. But look, man, I think if that's who you would bring in, I think that would be a really interesting experiment at LAFC. But even beyond that, even with the right manager, it brings me to my last point, which is there's just no guarantee that with the expansion of funds, that money gets spent well, right? Like, I don't know, man. Even look at Miami's roster, right? How many stars we can all count on that roster, and look where they are. And to me, this is some of the issue that only the structure of the league itself can fix, because you can give teams more funds, more financial runway. But the only reason I believe Inter Miami, let's use them as the example, is in the position they're in on the table because they know they can take it easy. In my opinion, I think there's too much talent on that team and on that bench for them to struggle in games the way that they have this season. But part of me feels like they're going to turn it on when it really tends to matter most, heading into playoffs, and then that's when we'll probably get the most real version of Miami. And that all comes down to how the league is structured. Do you feel like even increasing the salary cap or the salary budget, if you will, really make that much of a dent?
Absolutely. It'll definitely make a big difference if they increase the salary cap. And that's definitely something that I would do. That would be one of my first 3 moves that I would make if I were in charge of the MLS. It would essentially be to kill what I call the quote unquote alphabet soup, right? We got to stop hiding behind the TAM, hiding behind the GAM. And really, I would roll all that allocation money into a unified salary budget that's at least 50% higher than the current 6.4 million. So you got to let the sporting directors, even though we've seen, like you mentioned, with some other teams that they've spent not too wisely with the funds that their owners have given them, but you got to let them decide whether they need 3 $1 million defenders or whether they need 1 $3 million striker. You can't make the decision for them.
Yeah, I agree. It's just I feel like, yeah, like you know, you gave Austin FC a pretty decent sized budget. It's got some decent ballers out there. They're playing, in my opinion, terribly. Other examples across the league, right? LAFC not playing well right now. Heung-min Son specifically not playing up to the standard in which we all thought he was going to be playing at in his second season. So there's a lot to kind of unpack there, but again, probably a deeper conversation for another day. But going into what more you would change if we were to increase the salary cap by, let's say, 50%. I think that opens up quite a bit. But when I think about adding even just the cherry on top of that, could we not also look at things like, I don't know, I've loosely joked about a luxury tax in this league.
I think great idea. And that's something I had it on my notes. We didn't get into it, but
yeah,
that I love that idea. I love, you could go to like an NBA style structure where if you want to be one of those teams that wants to spend, then go ahead and spend, but know that you're going to have to give into this pool of money that's going to go to the rest of the league. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Why not try something like that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's like there's a blueprint already out there, right? If the fear is, hey, we don't know what the pitfall of this is going to be, because again, I think you look back at things like, it's honestly just it's crazy how disappointing the player for cash trades have been. Like, I don't know why. I expected that to just unlock things for so many teams. We could probably count how many of those there have been on one hand, right?
Well, that's one of the other changes I would make. I want to do unrestricted cash trades. So
yeah,
I know, like you mentioned, the league removed the limit on the cash for player trades, right? And that's a really, really good start for what it is that we need to do. But we have to go a little bit further. We have to really, really, really kind of go into a robust internal market. So let's say Inter Miami, right? If they want to pay cash to, let's say, Seattle for a player, right? Let's say they want Jordan Morris just because that's who they want. I don't know. And they want to pay Seattle for that guy. Then you need to let that money stay with Seattle and allow them to reinvest that money. Not how it is now, where you are not allowed to do that. So that's really how you create a healthy kind of market for teams to have a path to be competitive. You can't restrict these types of money. So they really need to unrestrict these cash trades and allow these teams to use that money to reinvest within their own team.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think other ideas that I was trying to float just mentally through my mind. So here's where I think we are 100% aligned. Raise the salary budget significantly. Don't know what, I mean, you threw out 50, but at least by 50%. I don't know even how that would kind of like compound and maybe even grow in flexibility long term. But I think, yes, some dramatic increase of the salary budget. Simplify or just remove the alphabet soup, like you just mentioned, right? TAM, GAM, all that probably just needs to go. They're mechanisms that are just, I don't know. It feels like playing with weird monopoly money at the end of the day. adding, I threw this one in there too. I thought it was interesting. Adding competitive spending incentives. So if you don't go the luxury tax style model, okay, but maybe reward teams that qualify for a regional competition, like let's say the Concacaf Champions Cup with like extra roster flexibility, like that like was already proposed by Dos Santos. How many roster spots would you throw out there?
At least one. At least one. I mean, that was something on my list too of something that I would change. I called it the Champions Cup roster bonus. So essentially, if your team is in the Champions Cup, you get an extra spot that doesn't count against this cap specifically for that tournament. So, I mean, I think that's another great idea to throw out there and float it amongst people to see if it'll stick.
And they just lose the spot if they fail to qualify for Triple C the next year.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so right now you would probably, it'd be really cool if you could also somehow incentivize teams to give that type of flexibility. Like say an owner didn't want a budget, but give them even an extra incentive for homegrowns, right? Like be rewarded for producing and retaining players. And, if you have to play those types of players in those extra slots when some of your starters need a rest, even in a big competition, I think that should still be incentivized in some form or fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it all goes down to, again, the different rules and mechanisms that they have in place in order for these teams to not be able to, again, reinvest the money when they sell certain players. I know that there's a lot of, kind of mumbo jumbo involved in where some of that money goes. It goes to the league, some goes to the team, some goes to somebody else. So, and there needs to be a lot more clarity amongst that as well, right? There needs to be a lot more clarity amongst what happens with that money. Where does it go? Does it get reinvested and things like that? Because we don't really know, covering the league, where it goes at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we also both agree that if someone from the league was actually like tuning in and watching, the smallest realistic change that would make the biggest competitive difference is that the salary budget.
Yeah, I think so. No doubt.
I think so
no
too.
Doubt.
I'm trying to, just things, a lever they could pull right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, and we didn't really mention it, but the other thing that I think is going to really help MLS going forward is the schedule change. And the schedule change coming up in 2027, I think is going to be huge, because one of the things that a lot of folks complain about, especially in the Continental Cups, is obviously Liga MX is coming off of their regular tournament, and they're basically in form, whereas the MLS teams are in preseason form. And so you're going to play these CONCACAF Champions Cup games as sometimes your first competitive match of the season. And that's just no good. You need to be at least a few months under your belt, get your legs wet, get your chemistry going amongst the team, and really be ready for a tournament that way. So the fact that they're going to change to a fall spring schedule, and they'll have a good amount of months under their belt before CONCACAF Champions League starts, is going to be a big plus for the future of the MLS.
Yeah, and for the future of the fans. I mean, in all honesty, it's nothing against the version of the teams that we see when Triple C really starts to get underway. But I mean, frankly, it's just not seeing the teams in form. And how much better would the product actually be if we got to see it when, there was routine cadence amongst the team, the fitness was there, teams were in kind of flow state a little bit. I think, in all honesty, Triple C could use such a better product all the way around to engage fans who aren't actively tuning into MLS week in and week out. I think, like you said, just getting a better product on the field could do so much for that alone.
Absolutely. And it starts with the salary budget. It starts with fixing some of the rules and allowing teams to spend a little bit more on those players that are 12 to 20. Those are, at the end of the day, those are the players that win you tournaments, because when you're playing a Liga MX team on the road in 7,000, 8,000 feet of altitude in their crazy stadiums, because they're crazy. And I believe Mark Dos Santos mentioned it, that he doesn't know what playing in hell is like, because he's a Catholic. But playing in the Toluca Stadium is sometimes compared to playing in hell. So look, at the end of the day, when the star players sub off. When an Angel Correa for Tigres subs off, or a Rodrigo Aguirre for Tigres subs off, who comes in? Marc-Pierre Gignac. Who comes in for Nashville when Hani Mukhtar is tired in the 78th minute and you know you need somebody to come in? You don't even know the player's name. Or sometimes it's you know, because there's so many injuries or because there's such a lack of depth in the roster, it's a homegrown that you're forcing to come in for 15 minutes into a game that is it's just out of his level right now. And so you need to have the money to spend on that secondary part of the roster so that you can have the right substitutes. And if you have injuries, you can have the right players come in. And that doesn't just go for competed in CONCACAF. That goes for competing in the MLS as well. I mean, we see it week in and week out. Last week, Toronto, 11 injuries.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just horrendous. They're throwing out basically a B or a C team out there, and it's just not. It's just not good for the game. It's just not good for the game at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think overarching sentiment from my side, I'm inclined to agree. I do think at the same time, right, the challenge is not just raising the ceiling of the league. It's figuring out how to do that without destroying the floor. Because it's just, again, it's like a house of cards, right? It's just been constructed in such a certain way that if you remove such a key pillar, a key card, if you will, the whole thing collapses. And so, you know, I think I'm kind of what I'm most cognizant about. But at the same time, I agree. I think we've reached kind of a tipping point. And if we really want to grow, hit that ceiling meaningfully, there are a series of even short-term changes we can make now that would produce a significantly better product that, in all honesty, would also put money in the owner's pockets. If they're trying to even make this the biggest business, let's say, in American professional sports, well, you know how business stays good? You win. You win in a competitive league that people love to watch, that, you know, folks from all over the world will tune into, like what was sold to Apple TV when they bought the rights to MLS. That's really how you win financially and on the pitch, while giving the fans something they can not just, you know, tune into casually on the weekend, but really be solely, right, at a soul level as a human, invested in a club, in a team, in a franchise. Daniel, before we get out of here, man, I do have one question, because we did kind of ask about it a little bit in the beginning. You know, what does MLS really want to be? I don't think either one of us can meaningfully answer that question for them on this video, but I am still curious from your perspective, right? What would you say 5 years from now that MLS is finally serious about competing with Liga MX? What would have to happen?
I think the first thing is in 2027, obviously, we're going to execute the fall to spring calendar. I think that, and they need to do that shift seamlessly. It can't be a mess like everything else MLS does. It has to be seamless. In 2028, they need to double the spending power for the middle class of the roster. Those 12 to 20 players, not the starting lineup. Obviously, I'm talking about the bench. I'm talking about the depth. They need to do that in 2028. I think if they do that in those 2 years, in 2029, they'll be able to win the Champions Cup. So this is a 3-year plan. And I think by 2030, they would become a top 5 destination for players in their prime, not just legends in their twilight, to come to the MLS. That's only if we align our schedule like we are doing, but we need to align our spending. And if we can align our spending and get all our ducks in a row, then I think that gap is going to disappear. And I think in 5 years, they definitely have the chance to do that. If not a top 5 destination in the world, definitely a top 5 destination in the region. Because right now, you're behind Mexico, you're behind Brazil, you're behind Argentina, you're probably behind some of the other countries as well. And you want to be ahead of all those countries.
Yeah, I agree. Not a backup option, which too often it seems to be the case, right? If they can't make it work somewhere else, well, MLS is always there. Yeah, man, I think there's a lot for the audience to unpack. I think we went through a number of ideas that could potentially work. The one I would love to even see remotely thrown out there by the league, by a committee, or anyone who's spearheading the growth of MLS, would honestly be the luxury tax. I've joked about that on this channel before, and mainly because, again, you see it work in the NBA, but it seems, in my mind, the best of both worlds. And you get a chance to incentivize those who want to spend, those who have that whatever, $500 million valuation, some of the numbers that we see thrown around for MLS teams, some of the biggest markets in the league all the time. If the pockets are that deep, reward them for spending, but at the same time, right, do not punish the ones who want to stay within a certain financial parameter, season in and season out. That's okay. You want to be there, great. But if you want to, be a team that continuously spends over to be ambitious and get this club as many championships as you possibly can, you should be allowed to do so with the understanding that, hey, you're going to have to contribute to the broader gain of this league and its teams, as part of that. That's okay. I think a lot of owners would be somewhat open to that conversation as well. But look, man, this was a great video. Daniel, thank you again, man. I really appreciate it. Any parting words before you go?
I just appreciate you having me on. Love the conversation. Would love to be back in the future. And man, there's a lot more to unpack in a lot of these topics. So hopefully your listeners enjoy the video, and we'll be back another time.
Yeah, man, absolutely. You definitely will be back another time, guys. And look, I think to continue the discussion, again, man, I say it always, but be sure to drop a comment, especially for Daniel down below. I think, when I see him on X, he's having these conversations in the replies time and time again. I don't see why he wouldn't do that on YouTube either. But again, we also want to just keep the debate going, right? Again, we're at that tipping point between the fans of the old and fans of new and global football. We got to find a way to get this league to where we all know it can be. So drop those comments down below, like the video, share it with a friend. And if you do want to follow along more with Daniel, all his links are going to be down below. So go check out his X profile, engage with him there. Go check out his YouTube channel. He's doing a lot of great things in the media space, covering parts of football that many of us aren't tuning into. So be sure to go follow everything he's doing right down there. And again, we appreciate you tuning in. From everybody here at Wake Up MLS and Goals TV, my name's Jose. That's Daniel. We'll catch you guys next time.